Hello, everyone. Welcome to Where Work Meets Life. I'm Dr. Laura, and today we're going to talk with Detective Sweet about unlikely connections, premonitions, and the power to make a difference. So this is part 2 of a 2-part podcast that we're doing. And David Sweet is a 24-year member of the Calgary Police Force, and he specializes in some of the most difficult situations and crimes, including drugs, guns, gangs, organized crime, missing persons, and homicide. He's also a writer of Skeletons in My Closet, as well as another book that is coming around courage. And we talked about that in the last episode. And today we're going to explore some more very interesting territory. So welcome back, Dave Sweet.
Thank you, Dr. Laura. Nice to be back.
Absolutely. So the world is full of challenges and uncertainty, whether it's the pandemic turned endemic, economic uncertainty, the war, as well as polarization in society. On top of that, you deal with the worst types of criminals. How do you stay positive and not get cynical about the human condition, Dave?
Well, I think it's a choice. I really believe that how we approach the world is really an internal thing. We can always be influenced by sort of external factors, like some of the things that you've just listed above. But I make the decision every day whether or not I want to leave the house happy or sad. Make the decision every day whether or not I want to have a good day or a bad day. So for me, it's sort of like an internal state, more or less than an external thing, right? I make the decision. And if I want to be sad one day, I decide how long that's going to be. And when I decide I want to be happy again.
Okay, and that works for you.
That's one of the things that works for me. I think the other thing that works well for me is I do have an ability to sort of reframe things or look for experiences to be optimistic about. And I try to, as we spoke about in a previous podcast, I try to find the silver linings in things, even things that are, difficult to deal with sometimes. I try to find a positive outlet each and every time.
And I think your book, Skeletons in My Closet, really exemplified that even in the worst tragedies, there are silver linings and learnings.
Yeah, I mean, there is. And it's never to, I don't ever want anybody to think that I'm minimizing the impact tragedy has on somebody. And if we didn't have it, it would be better. But when we are faced with it, and we see difficult things like this all of the time, how we approach it, how we are going to kind of mentally process it, that is up to the individual. And sadly, I've seen some families and some people not be able to process it very well. And that tragedy that bestowed their loved one now bestows them, completely engulfs them, and ruins their life in a way that they probably never imagined it could. But on the same token, I've seen the other way, where families have rallied around. They've come to understand the tragedy, not spend so much time wondering about the why of it, but then looking at maybe creating a legacy or a foundation or an organization, or telling the story of their tragedy to hopefully shed light on a whole bunch of other issues: intimate partner violence, guns, gangs, whatever it might be.
Absolutely. And on the last episode, I talked about how I met you, how you were the head investigator in a double homicide that impacted my family deeply and was quite horrific. And I want to say that I think that experience and going through that definitely taught me a lot. And it's very impactful to go through it. And I think people have different ways of trying to make a difference. And as the auntie to Jasmine and Aaliyah, I really wanted to raise awareness about domestic violence and the early warning signs of dangerous boyfriends, and how can I make a difference to draw some greater awareness. So I ended up putting on an event called With Her, with a wonderful committee of women, and it was in November of 2019. So pre-pandemic days when we had big events, no problem. And thank goodness we're back to that again. But this With Her event was really powerful in bringing experts to talk about what are some of the early warning signs, and also how we can understand the issue at hand and make a difference for the organizations that help women leave domestic violence, which I understand you're doing in terms of getting them educated and back on their feet through Gems for Gems, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, the certainly I've became involved in an organization called Gems for Gems as a scar. I realized a few things as I sort of jumped on board and gave my full support to that wonderful organization that's run by a gal by the name of Jordan Guilford. One, I wanted to be part of an organization that was supporting and empowering women not go back to their abuser. Jem spoke to me on that level. I was introduced to the organization through a family that had already been supporting, who had lost a daughter to intimate partner violence. And three, once I started to learn more about intimate partner violence, I really came to learn, or came to know, that 85% of the time ish, the abuser is a man. And so if men are going to be, if we are the biggest part of the problem, then we have to also be part of the solution. I mean, it just makes sense. And so I feel like when it comes to intimate partner violence, men have to be at the table, and men have to be working towards trying to figure out solutions that maybe can sort of start to end the cycle of violence. A very lofty goal, I realize. But without men at the table, we wouldn't get there. And to be honest with you, at some point in time, if you take enough, if you're involved in so many investigations where I've removed the bodies of young women that have been killed by an intimate partner, at some point in time, you want to be part of the proactive solution, not just the reactive measures that happen as a result of when a partnership ends.
No kidding. And so how does Gems for Gems go about that? How does the charity work?
Yeah, so there's sort of three main prongs. The first is the whole organization started as a jewelry drive, and it was sort of it was a vision of Jordan's to be able to get donated jewelry and then deliver that donated jewelry to women in shelters. And there's a lovely little note that's attached to each package of jewelry that's given at Christmas time. And really, it's a note that just says, you know what? We, the women of the world, see you. We support you, and we wish you well on your journey. And so that's the first prong, which is that's sort of an empowerment piece for women that are in it and they're going through it right now. And it's just to let them know, hey, you're heard, you're important, you're seen more so, and we've got you. And then the second prong is a public awareness campaign. It's called our Thrive program. And that is an opportunity for us to sort of, again, highlight the issues around intimate partner violence. And it's significant in Canada, depending on what website or what statistic you read. It's either every 5 or every 6 days in Canada, a woman is killed by an intimate partner. It's too many. 20% of girls by the age of 18 have experienced some form of domestic abuse or intimate violence. That's too many. 1 in 3 women in their lifetime will experience it as well. So this is a huge problem, and we spend millions and millions and millions of dollars a year fighting it. And so our Thrive program brings awareness to all of those things. And again, is an empowerment piece to the women that have survived intimate partner violence, gives them a place to gather. And also it gives an opportunity for the public to learn a little bit more about this very important issue. And then 3, we have a scholarship program, which we felt was, or Jordan really felt was an important part of all of this. And what that is trying to create financial aid to women that need tools and training quickly. And so we partnered with one of the aesthetic institutes in Calgary, and we're able to deliver scholarships to women that are interested in receiving training that will give them the tools and talents that they need to be successful after a year, and that gives them that sort of some opportunity for financial stability. It allows them to work inside their homes as an esthetician, things of that nature. They may not have dreamed that was the best thing for them, or that's how they envisioned their lives were going to go, but this gives them the opportunity then to start their own business and that kind of thing. And then 4, I guess we do have a 4th. It's a community initiative that we just started. Again, another scar that was sort of the beginning of all of this, but it's called Hope's Cradle. And Gems for Gems now has partnered with a local fire hall in Strathmore, Alberta, to deliver the very first safe surrender site for infants that moms may not feel they can care for or want. It's giving them an option to put a baby in a warm cradle in a fire hall so that they have an opportunity and chance for life. And so that program is called Hope's Cradle, and it's our most recent community initiative.
Wow, that is so powerful, to be able to even save a single baby, right? I mean, is hugely impactful on the number of lives that life will impact. So how many cradles do you vision having for Hope's Cradle?
Well, I mean, of course, the vision would be to have cradles throughout the city of Calgary proper and beyond. We just recently learned that we're going to have another cradle going into Manitoba, which is fantastic. And we hope that the idea just continues to build and gain momentum, and more people will sign on to it. The cradles, hopefully they're never used. But if somebody is considering abandoning a newborn in an unsafe environment, this at least gives them an option to maybe change that narrative, where no option like that occurred before. And we can see what the outcome of that is. It's tragic. And I have myself personally been involved in a couple cases where babies were abandoned in unsafe environments and didn't get the chance to live, or a family out there who desperately wanted a baby to ever have a baby to grow up with. So
Yeah, just to try and imagine that sense of hopelessness that mother must feel, to feel that is the only avenue, abandonment. It's impossible to imagine, but I think Hope's Cradle gives another point of thought or reference.
I hope it really is just sort of providing an option for people where one didn't exist before. And so the vision for it is, of course, that there's Hope's Cradles in a number of locations. So it makes the options more available to a greater number of people. I think we really scratched the surface in understanding how many infants are abandoned in unsafe environments, such as dumpsters. I think we scratched the surface. I think it's very rare that we actually come across one, not because they're not in there. It's just that it's rare that we find them. And so hopefully, and part of that is that a big part of the demographic of a woman that is considering, or a mother that's considering that form of abandonment, has concealed a pregnancy, has probably not been to a doctor, had any kind of health checks. Nobody knows that she's even pregnant. So the baby is born, and then is just the decision is made to abandon. And so now we're giving them that opportunity to hopefully be able to abandon that infant in a place where they can have a life and enjoy a life, and a family can enjoy having them in their lives.
Well, I hope this gets an excellent buzz and the word spreads on it, and you get as many cradles as your vision calls for.
I hope so too.
So, turning our attention to a topic that I don't usually address on the podcast, but I feel that I want to, is the idea of unlikely connections and premonitions. And what are premonitions? And the skeptic, I mean, trained in science, right, in the science of psychology, but trained in the five senses and data and knowledge, these things like intuition and premonitions and such, they just don't hold much weight. They don't, do they, Dave?
No, I understand that. Actually, it's funny because I come from a science background. My father was a well-known and respected paleontologist in Alberta, and and so I grew up in a family of science. So these ideas, premonitions or intuitions, or I often call them affirmations, would be difficult for some people to accept. But I've worked around death for 14 years. In that time, I've been involved in almost 700 cases of suspicious death or homicide. I've talked to so many families, and they share stories that make you start to believe or wonder whether or not premonitions could actually be true, or if these affirmations, these things that they see after a loved one has passed, are actually real, and affirmative that maybe there's a part along the journey that we just don't understand yet, but the dead are showing it to us in different ways.
Yeah. And so I'd like to tell the story about the painting. And I don't know if you want me to start and then you can kind of finish it up.
Yeah, I would love you to start the story.
Sure. And what we'll do is we'll show this image on the podcast, on the video version on YouTube. But essentially, when my niece and my great niece were missing, it was quite a number of days. It seemed to go on, and it was just heartbreaking, this whole waiting game. And as days go on and you realize they're out there somewhere, and they need to be found, and will they ever be found? And it was, I mean, just such a tragic scenario that was unfolding. And I remember I was at a silent auction. It was a charity event for Woods Homes, which a friend of mine brought me to. And I wasn't in the best headspace, but I had already committed to going to this charity event. And I love to support good causes for youth. And that's what Woods Homes is all about, is youth. And I said, okay, I'll go for a couple of hours out to this event. And I was drawn to this painting. I was really drawn to this painting. And what it is I'm going to hold it up because it's in my office here. But what it is almost a dirt road that curves into the forest. And it's beautiful. I mean, it's really beautiful. I've always been drawn to trees and fall colors in this one, and beautiful sky. And so I ended up bidding on this thing, and I wasn't in that social of a mood, to be honest. I'm an extrovert usually, but that night I wasn't. But I kept on going back to the painting and making sure I protected myself as the bidder who would get the painting. And I ended up getting it and bringing it home. And I was really praying profusely for the girls that next day. And my parents growing up, they had always been very, very charitable people. And my mom was quite religious. And that's how I grew up, was with a very religious mother. And she would always bring turkeys at Christmas to this convent of sisters. So actual nuns with habits and all that. And I decided I would go visit the nuns. I hadn't been in ages, and my parents, I didn't have my parents anymore, but I decided to go visit these nuns and, praying for the girls very, very intensely. And this painting was now home with me. And then the next day, it was announced that the girls were found. And I'm going to let Dave tell you the place that they were found.
Yeah, I mean, so it was amazing because I actually remember. I mean, one of the things that we do is in these police investigations, anyone probably be aware. I mean, we monitor Facebook accounts and things of that nature. I actually think you put a post up about your painting, but lo and behold, I remember seeing the painting as just something that came up, and we do that for a number of reasons. I'll just qualify. It's not because anybody's in trouble, but we like to know what information's out there in the public and in the public view. And, if we're sharing information back with a family, one, make sure that it's sort of staying in-house and that kind of thing. So it's not going out to the greater thing, just kind of protect the integrity of the investigation itself. And so we do monitor different accounts and things of that nature when these things are happening sometimes. And I saw the picture pop up on Facebook and I could not believe it. But the following day, and like you say, I can try and paint the picture for the people that are listening on the podcast, but a picture says 1,000 words, and so for those that can tune in to the YouTube channel, they'll enjoy this. But I was standing on the road that your painting was really painted from, the image of the artist. I was now there a day later, recovering the bodies of the two girls. So I took a picture of it because I couldn't believe it. The tree line, the mountains, all of these things in the background that I came to love about the painting and came to love about the picture. Because for me, when we talk about silver linings, affirmations, taking pauses away from really difficult things, that was just a really lovely affirmation for me to know that things were maybe okay and that the girls were in a good place and that they were, almost speaking out through a picture that was purchased by a family member to their location. It was almost like painting a map to their location, and it was amazing to see. And whether people believe in it or not, that's fine. But there are some very uncanny similarities between the two pictures.
Absolutely. And I really feel in my heart that that's connected to the girls, and the girls are at peace. And it was a message, and other people may not agree, and that's okay. Everyone has their own opinion and belief in what's possible and what signs are out there. But despite all of my training in science, I absolutely believe in intuition and connectedness. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful story. I think that, I mean, it has an effect on people when they see the two pictures side by side, and it's a beautiful. I call them an affirmations, but it's a beautiful affirmation that suggests that people are sort of sending a message from somewhere saying we're okay, we're good. To this day, I mean, I wish none of that ever happened to the family, and it was a difficult thing. I have no words for it. I don't know what it would be like, but I hope the family takes some solace in knowing that there was a lot of things that happened during that time that I think were sort of spiritually connecting on some level. And some of them may have been generated by the girls. At least that's how I view it. And you talk about belief. The only thing I'll say about that is as long as belief creates meaning and purpose in your own life, then who are we to ever say that you're wrong? And I think that's something we all can remember. We all have different beliefs. We all think differently. It takes courage to express a belief. Um, and it's not really up to me to say you're right or you're wrong. If it brings meaning and purpose in your life, that's fantastic.
Really well put. So I think I'm going to change the word premonition to affirmation because that's what we're talking about, isn't it?
It is, but I can just mention real quickly on premonitions. Families have certainly shared over time that they've had uh, premonitions. The victims maybe will call family members and tell them that they love them and that kind of thing. I had a case very much like that years ago where the mom believes the daughter's life was fated to end that particular evening, and it was fated because of the phone calls that she made that night to sort of just check in with everybody, make sure they were well. Hours later, she's standing outside of a nightclub and somebody fires a gun into a crowd, and that bullet had eyes and it struck her right in the chest, and she died immediately at the scene for no reason. It wasn't a boyfriend, it wasn't anything, it was just a random shot. And but she had made the arrangements ahead of time, according to mom, that this was it's kind of like her final goodbyes without her knowing that they were final goodbyes. Beautiful. Another story of a premonition that I love is a story that was shared to me not that long ago by a man whose mother was suffering from dementia. And every time he'd go to visit her, she was in a garden, her garden back in the 1940s. And the people that were in the garden were all people that had passed before her. So she had brothers and father and mother and people like that were in this garden. She would always visit with them in her dementia state. Her oldest son passed while she was this way, and this being the middle boy, he decided he'd show up at the garden, show up at the care facility that she was at, and wasn't sure exactly how he was going to explain to her that her oldest son had died, and thought maybe he would just leave it. And on that particular day, when she was in the garden and telling him about all the people that were in the garden, the oldest son was in the garden that day with her, which maybe is a premonition as well on some level. A beautiful story, and maybe suggests that the veil between us is a lot thinner than we think it is. But the last thing I'll say about premonitions, and it goes back to something we talked about earlier, when we talk about intimate partner violence and abuse and 1 in 3 women. Not that I'm a harbinger for divorce necessarily, but I would just remind everyone, and particularly people, women particularly, that if you're in a situation where somebody's acting like they don't care, you should believe them. And that is a premonition as well. And so when we talk about warning signs and things like that, that can lead to trouble later, just always remember that first. If a person acts like they don't care, believe them, because they probably don't. And if a person acts conversely like they do, you should believe that too. But I do always want to remind people that I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, actions speak loudly, don't they?
They do. Yeah.
Your actions speak so loudly, I cannot hear what you have to say.
Yeah, that's right.
Or what you're saying. So this is a question I ask all the guests as we're wrapping up here. If you didn't need to sleep and you could buy that time back to do whatever you wanted to do, what else would you do with that time, Dave?
Other than policing, you mean?
No, the answer could be policing. So you have, how much do you sleep a night? 7 hours, 8 hours?
Oh, I don't know. 4 or 5 hours maybe a night.
Okay. If you could get 5 hours back a day, what would you do with it that you didn't have before?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know. I think I would just continue to try and build on the experiences that this life gives you, enjoy every moment of it. So I don't know if it would be going and, going for a walk, smelling the fresh air, feeling the crispness of the wind, whatever it is. I think that it would be spent having some sort of an experience. Yeah.
Beautiful. And if you could have one wish for a better world, what would it be?
I really wish that we could all somehow figure out how to not focus so much on the things that make us different, but to focus more on the things that make us all the same. And I think once we have that, there'll be a better understanding that, we are all people living in this big, basically giant spaceship called Earth, and we need to get along better. And if we all sort of accepted that loving people isn't that hard to do, I think we'd have a much better world. So I would hope that we could all kind of figure out a way to do that better.
And when you say the things that we all have in common as human beings, can you give us a couple of examples?
Well, we all have a need for companionship, for love. We all want compatibility on some level with people. We want to have connection, right? I mean, from a physical perspective, we all look the same on the inside. I know that for a fact. And, I think that I think it's just that human need I think we all have it on some level. Need for connection, compatibility, to feel valued and loved and all that kind of stuff.
Well put. It was just wonderful speaking with you on a whole number of levels. Thank you so much for all your insights and what you bring to this challenging world, Dave.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're all part of just to leave with this whole idea. If we all want to live in safe, vibrant communities, we all have a part to play. So just please, everybody, remember that it's not just the police's responsibility. The police are the people that show up, and they're the ones that take the pointy end of the stick. But there's a lot of things that go wrong before the police are ever called to that person's very last or very worst day. And so we all have a part to sort of step up and make our community safer and more vibrant by recognizing that we all have a role to play in that. And that's just something I'd just like to leave everybody with. So thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Laura.
Thank you for being here, Dave, and for that great final point. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Where Work Meets Life. If you enjoyed this content, please rate and review the podcast, as that helps me get it out to more people. Visit my website at drlaura.live and sign up for my monthly e-newsletter full of tips and resources. Please engage with us on social media and check out the podcast summary for links to my psychology practices, Canada Career Counseling, Calgary Career Counseling, and Synthesis Psychology. Stay well.